Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Collaborative Open Data Policies with Roseville and Santa Rosa, California. Our host today is Athlon Lathan. Athlon is joined by Santa Rosa's Director and Chief Technology Officer, Eric McHenry, and Roseville's Chief Information Officer, Hong Se. This webinar is designed to be interactive and we encourage your questions. Just use the Send to Staff feature in GoToWebinar and we'll answer as soon as possible. So again, thanks for joining us today and let's get started. Athlon?
Thank you very much, Jessica. Thank you for everyone joining. To start off, I'd love to ask both you, Eric and Say, if you would take just a few moments to tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe how you got into working in the public sector, and then we'll kick this off. Eric, can we start with you?
Yes, thank you, Athlon. Thank you for everyone joining us today. Yeah, I came to the city of Santa Rosa and the public sector about 12 years ago. I spent about 20 so years in the private sector, working at Hewlett-Packard and Agilent Technology in the research development labs, marketing, general management, and general manager and vice president capabilities in that organization. It was a great time. I, however, though, wanted to do something closer to home, to do something that mattered more in my community, and was fortunate enough to find a job at the city of Santa Rosa as an IT director and CTO. So that's a little bit of my background. I'll pass it back to you, Athlon.
Perfect. And Say, if you'd like to share a little bit about your background.
Okay, no problem. So I am the Chief Information Officer with the City of Roseville, a position that I've been held since 2010. Our team consists of about 54 contracts and outsourced interns and full-time employees, and our budget is about close enough to about $50,000 worth of departmental business technologies and capital improvement projects. I came from the city of Irving in Texas, which is about the size of about 2.5 times larger than Roseville. And my main concentrations is more of a business liaison, technology change agents, and our greatest accomplishment is being able to move away from Texas to California out here and enjoy the Sunshine State.
Not a bad reason. Not a bad reason. I appreciate you both taking some time to give us a little bit of history and background on you. In order to kick this off, I think the first question that most people are going to ask is, what motivated you to take on an open data project? And we'll swap the order here and Say, would you like to tackle that first?
Definitely. So as everyone probably are aware of it, that the federal government has a standard, and there has been in discussion since 2009, and the policy was put in place about a couple years ago, in about June, I think it's 2 years now, with an open data charter. And California also has an open data standards about 3 years ago that was formed. And the city of Roseville has a vision with our councils embracing open governments, which is, enable public access of information, as well as process transparency, which means that increased community participations and collaborations. IT departments, innovation and technology departments has been very much trying to transform the city government's efforts. We look at open data as more than a technology, it's a new culture, and it's also a process reengineering. And last and final, it's not that expensive to do. It's the right things to do things out there. So that's what really motivated us to move towards the open data project.
Thank you, Say. Eric?
Yes, it was an interesting last 3 or 4 years for our city of Santa Rosa, and we're about 170,000 residents. We're located about a half hour north of San Francisco. We had an unfortunate incident about 2 years ago where a young adult was shot, and what happened around that incident was a renewed interest in our city council, our county environment, as well as our city staff to let's make sure that as we engage with the public that we're able to be as transparent as we can. And it's one of these things where we had sort of a linear effort within IT in our city to put more things on the web, more data out there, more transparent, crime stats, all that stuff. But when this happened, it was actually a step up in interest. And so it was a great confluence of time and events. There was a community need, a lot of city interest, elected interest, and then the technology that we, of course, moved forward with made us able to do it. And in fact, we're actually hiring a director of community engagement. And all these things are kind of all related toward our city's interest in having a more transparent and open, I think one of my counterparts calls it open by default, as opposed to the old days when we had to ask the department heads and we had to ask the city attorney, can we put this up on the web? Can we put this? Should we do this? And so it's really been a sea change in how we perceive what we want to do, both philosophically and practically.
No, that's fantastic, and I think you're right in analyzing and understanding the open by default. It's not easy to do, but we're starting to hear more and more in the community that's what folks would like to see. So appreciate that you're leading that charge. One of the things I wanted to remind those that have joined us in the webinar is submit your questions, and we'll get those a little bit later on. But if you have any questions for Eric and Say, we'd love to share those. So I think the next thing people are going to want to know, okay, you've decided we're going to go forward with open data. What does that really mean? So what challenges did you encounter during the project, and ultimately how did you address those? And Eric, if you'd like to jump in on this first.
Okay, so you can see my bullets on the slide. I would say, though, that the #1 challenge we had internally was a third one. It was in some segments, and not all, there was a perception of increased workload. And we heard comments such as, boy, if I put that out there, the public will essentially know more about what we're doing, and they will essentially pester us more to do more things, give more information. We heard, oh, if we put this out there, it may increase our ability or likelihood of liability, lawsuits, things like that. And what we determined after talking to other people that have done open data initiatives and looking really at what we had done in the past, it really doesn't happen. The people that typically come down to our council chambers, that write our city manager, that write our electeds, they love this. They actually love the fact of, they perceive that we're putting everything out there proactively as opposed to them having to pull it from the corner of the organization. So that passed pretty quickly, but frankly, it really comes down to the philosophy of the electeds and the executive staff. And it took our city manager, a number of directors like me, of saying, something, we're going to do this. This is the new way that our city is going to act, and we're going to do it. And once we sort of got past that, it made it work out pretty easily. The other two are sort of blocking and tackling, right? Which data sets that people want, which would help our internal staff, and the privacy expectations. And I'll finish with one other comment. I was talking to a peer of mine, great guy. He says, wait a minute, you mean that anyone can see my permit history now on the web if you do this? They can see what I put in a swimming pool? I said, look, they can see it already because we've been publishing this information for 10 years. Now it's more available. And he was okay with it. But the sort of emotional concerns, which are real to a lot of people, and frankly to me sometimes, about are we putting more stuff out there, but it really has not manifested itself anything other than initial discussions. Okay, back to you, Athlon.
Appreciate it. And Say, we noticed that your 5th bullet point got cut off, so our apologies, and you have friends in the audience that reminded us that it was being cut off, so you got people on your side, and would love if you would at some point say address that 5th bullet point so that everybody can be on the same page.
Okay, not a problem at all. Similar to what Eric has mentioned, it's about the thought process of increased workload, the perceptions, and the transition process and all that. And above and beyond that is, when we look out there, even though with the federal policy and standard has been created for almost about 5 years, and the state standard has been put in place for about 3 years, there really lack of vendor choices out there. And from opengovernment.coms to Juno to Tsikata, even up to custom coding, it was a tough time for us to go through the process out there to look at the vendor selection process. And also the second items that I put down there is the consolidations of data sets. And we have so many different data sets in our jurisdictions with a little bit over 200 applications, but thousands and thousands of databases. And which ones are truly the so-called systems of records that we can actually put out there. Once we identified all the systems of records and also sorted out all the confidentiality and privacy issues, which information are homeland security that we don't put, which information are more generic use, like Eric has mentioned. The transitions is relatively seamless out there. And the last bullets I put down is, is the future plans, is that how do we create ongoing automated programs and software interface. So these are done seamlessly every month or every week or every day when the data is being updated on our systems of records, and it gets automatically pushed out to the Tsikata website. So the City of Roseville data site is data.roseville.ca.us, and that conforms to pretty much a lot of the open data standards out there, just like the federal government. Back to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much for going through that, both you gentlemen. And say you touched on it a little bit, but as you went through this process, how did you ultimately decide which data sets to include in your initial implementation? And then, with that, what has been maybe some of the initial feedback from departments as you were exploring getting their data online? Say, we can start with you.
Okay. So City of Roseville is a very much collaborative cities with all the 17 full services city departments that we have. Our current data sets like GIS and crimes information are populated in all different sites of the websites out there. So we take a look on quick wins, what we call financials information. We look at crime information. We look at permitting information, like Eric mentioned. We very quickly created a team, and each different department, 17 different departments, have a data coordinator that starts sitting down and look at, hey, what are the most favorite open record requests? What are the most frequent public record requests out there? Is that by media? Is that by public? Is that by special interest group? So once we make the decisions out there, we post the foremost large data sets: financial, the crimes, the utility, and as well as the business permitting information. And again, data.roseville.ca.us. That is the generic site that we created.
Fantastic. And Eric, if you were so inclined, would you maybe throw out the portal for your open data initiative, and then dive into the questions?
Sure, Aslan. We are data.srcity.org. And I really have to stress what Say said too. There's a lot of benefit to being consistent with the naming convention. We are working with our county of Sonoma, and they are going to be data.sonomacounty.org, right? And I think just using that terminology helps reinforce in people's minds who look at data across different jurisdictions that this is a sort of an initiative, the same type of initiative. So to answer the question of, how did we decide? It was really talking to a lot of people like Say, and Aslan and the team had some good information on the Tsikata site about the most used data sets. We looked at a lot of other cities. We looked at what we had currently available. Like Say said, we wanted to get some quick wins. I told my peers on the executive team, the department heads, that I really wanted each of them to provide at least one data set out of their organization. And they did that. And the data sets that they typically picked were a subset of what other people had used also, with frankly very few exceptions. We had some interesting information though. We had some ahas. One person said, hey, unclaimed checks is a huge problem for finance, because we get people calling, usually speculative people calling, to find out unclaimed checks, that we have to do a report for them every month. And so that's one we're going to be putting up very shortly, right? And that comes from the department starting to understand that this actually can help them in how they do their job, and is consistent with the direction we want to go in anyway. And one last thing, we're working closely with the county of Sonoma, and we're the county considers this a county island. We're a little pocket inside the county. We decided that, we call it something else. We decided that we really had a strong interest, and this is their CIO and me, to present the same type of a portal to our residents, the contractors, the residents that live in the county and in the city. And so we work with the county to launch, they're launching their Tsikata platform shortly. And we try to pick some data sets that were of interest across county and city boundaries. Permitting is one, business licenses is another, things like that. So that also helped us kind of identify what we thought people wanted to look at. Crime Stats was the other one. If you're looking to come reside in the Sonoma County area in Santa Rosa or one of the other cities, you're probably interested in crime stat data not just from the city, the urban growth boundary, but you're also probably interested in the crime stats from the county surrounding, because you can make your choice of where you choose to live and be informed by that data. So we work with them quite tightly to have our crime stat data show up the same way in both of our portals. Okay, back to you, Aslan.
I appreciate it, and thank you for that example of the collaboration between the city and the county. I know as this initiative continues to grow, what we hear from folks in the community is, they may live in one city, work in another, vice versa. So having access to data across city and county lines is important, and not even having your city siloed, is going to work much in the future. So glad that you're doing a lot of that collaboration. So as far as, now you've deployed open data, you've gone through some challenges. You talked a little bit about earlier, affecting staff and workflow. Was there any specifics around how you deployed the solution? Who'd you get involved and how much did it ultimately impact staff? Eric, we'll start with you on this one, as you both sat there patiently. Thank you.
It really wasn't very much of an impact on staff, and in our case, we already had a lot of the data sets already available in machine-readable format, which of course is the key step to getting it onto the portal. And I'm not necessarily putting in a plug for Tsikata, but it's incredibly easy to upload an Excel spreadsheet into Tsikata, and we realized we could quote-unquote train other city staff in 15 minutes. So that was a non-issue. Really the challenges that the department had when they did have them was which fields to show. And although all of the fields, let's take fire responses, although all of the fields around a fire response database might in fact be public records, there are some fields that we chose not to put up. And actually our local newspaper asked us about that, asked us why we didn't show all the fields. And we said, for example, we did not show the exact address. We chose, like a lot of cities, to sort of slightly randomize the address of a particular fire incident. In other words, if it happened on 123 Main Street, we would put it in our system as 100 Main Street. And by the way, Tsikata makes that easy to do, and I'll show that more later. And when asked why, the answer we gave, which was true, is that we think it's important for our public to know that there was a fire response on a 100 Main Street block, but we don't think it's that important to know it was Joe Blow's house and he had a medical issue, because that, although it's public record, is probably not as necessary. And we tried to respect the confidentiality and the privacy to the extent that we could of the public. So that was the only really challenges we had as we deployed them, was figuring out which fields we should show and which that, maybe we'll just hold off showing for a while. And I'll pass it back to Say, because one thing we have not done a good enough job of is automating our data sets up to Tsikata. And that's something that we're going to be working over the next couple of quarters to do that. It's pretty much manual for all of our data sets now, and we have to change that. Okay?
We have the same issue as well, as in terms of trying to automate, and we put that as more of a long-term goals. But I would like to start at the very far ends of the early stage of the process out there. We went out, actually solicited a grant with Microsoft in conjunction with partnership with Tsikata, and went through almost about 8 to 9 months of pilot testing and making sure that we really are telling the true stories of the information of what our business practices is about. Like Eric is saying out there, for crime information, we don't show the exact homes, address information, and all that, just to protect the privacy of the residents. And we actually show blocks, range information, and things like that. Those are very common today for crimes, incidents, reportings, and all that. So it goes back to collaborations, again, like I mentioned, with the multiple business unit that we have. And once you convince them that this is relatively simple to post the information out there, everyone pretty much embrace the process out there. My recommendations for any audience out there is pilot it with the companies that you have before you sign the agreements. And that way you can test it out with your internal staff members' time and see how much of an additional workload that you're increasing for your team members and all that. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Say, and Eric. I think that's great advice, Say. Moving forward with any project, to measure and understand the impact on your staff. And Eric, thanks for the plug. We don't mind those, and we'll happily take them. So moving on, as obviously Eric can say, California is moving towards a statewide open data policy. For others on the call from around the country, they may not have policies in place, so they may be looking at upcoming legislation. For both you gentlemen, how have you worked with your fellow counties and regions to implement open data as far as collaboration? And Eric, you touched on it a little bit earlier, so we'll start off again with you with the work you've done with Sonoma, and then Say, feel free to hop in.
Yeah. So it's called federation and of data sets, and simply it means that the data that comes from another entity can be shown on our site, but it's actually not on our site. It's federated with their site. So it's really a very powerful tool. We do not have to ask the county to send us data. They don't have to ask us to send them data because the data sets are federated. It shows up. So crime stats are the big one. Permitting, business licenses are some of the ones that we share in common with the county. The county, I just really have to say that they have been great to work with. Our county of Sonoma, their director, the CIO, and I work well together. We share, as I said, a strong interest in presenting similar interfaces where possible. We're doing the same thing for our permitting system as well. And so it made that relationship really easy, but it was really important for us to meet together as teams. And so our teams actually met together a number of times to talk about the progress of the initiatives. When we launched our open data platform to my city council, I invited the county to come, and they did. They were at the city council meeting with me, and our council was overjoyed, frankly, to hear that we're working with the county. And I'm going to be joining the county when they present to their board of supervisors as well. And I think that aside from just the data, the relationships and shared philosophies between the county and us are going to be critical to keeping the data sets, sort of rich data sets across organizations. Broader than the county, though, we don't really know what we're going to do about that. We believe that it makes a lot of sense to have the other cities in Sonoma County to be included in sort of a consortium of data and federating data. When we look outside of Sonoma County, it gets a little more problematic. And Tsikata is doing a great job to try to get some regional Bay Area data sharing forums. It's a little bit harder then, right, because the data sets need to be standardized in a way that's a little more challenging. So I'd say we've probably got a B- or a C on that. We've got our local county data sharing well, but not yet taken the more regional approach, which could include transit and things like that. I'm going to pass it back to Dave. I don't really have much more to say on it than this.
Okay. Everyone's understand the U.S. Geological Survey groups, the federal government team. They have been keeping up with this open data sets since the 1800s. And the concept is not new. And several of the cities in multiple different states have council of government as well too. They collect all the regional consolidations of GIS open data sets. So just as Eric has mentioned, the federation of databases and data sets and data dictionaries and data definitions, if we can be kept consistent, and the jobs would be so much easier to conform with the statewide open data policy because everybody would be posting the same information. You can do business intelligence comparison, you can do regional data sets comparisons and all that. We are very fortunate in the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, which comprises about 6 regional counties and about 26 cities. The regional areas out here has about 2.6 million in population. We form an innovative task force, and we are trying to collect what we call the regional data sets, and similar to what Tsikata is doing with the city of Roseville. And so as we continue to move forward out here, we'll be able to give progress and information and success and lesson learned for the rest of the agencies. With that is with Microsoft. We could potentially look into Yelp, we could potentially look into Carfax, we could potentially look into Acela, SignGuard, SAP, all this business entities that we have current business relationship today. and they are constantly polling us for, open records requests and things like that. Why don't we partner with them and start developing, regional or even statewide open data standards and policy? Those are challenges I would like to put out there for the team to consider.
That's great. Thank you both for that feedback. And I like the idea of partnering with more private entities. One of the things that we're trying to do in an extension of open data is around the ecosystem is the open data network and the partnerships with Yelp, Google, Zillow, et cetera, pulling in these private entities, tying them into city, county, and state data so that we can get that information back out into the hands of the people. So I think that's a great challenge you put out there, Say, so thank you. So as we move on to the next question, and we've gotten probably a half a dozen questions from the audience as well, so we'll do those at the end. City staff, and Say, we'll start with you.
The response so far has been, we did a soft rollout in January, and so we'll do a 6-month check-in close to hopefully in July or September timeframes internally. But it has been positive so far. We've seen a lot of the public and private website has been referencing the Roseville data sites, and we see the number of views has been increasingly going up. And so I think overall response.
February timeframe, we launched our budget app, which is the application that is a tailored app that does a really good job of presenting in this case, an existing prior year fiscal year budget. We launched that, and that was great. So our launch has been a soft launch. We have gotten really good thumbs up. Interesting enough, though, it's been from the people. We get a Public Records Act request that we think is broader than 1 or 2 people. We're starting to put those up on our site, on our portal, because our plan is to say, go to data.srcity.org, and that's where you'll find our responses to certain Public Records Acts. So it's been a good response. Our council has liked it because, as I mentioned early on, it dovetailed with the strong interest of the council to not just appear more open and transparent, but to take some measurable steps toward being open and transparent. It's more than just checking a box for our council. It is really the right direction. We've heard about the California, Open Data Initiative, and I think had we not been in this position back in our executive staff, because we already have a portal, we're putting stuff out there. When someone asks about salary information of all of our employees, we tell them to go to our portal. It's already there. So it's a nice place that we have ready for us, as opposed to if we didn't, it would be a lot more challenging given our city dynamics right now.
That's great. And Eric, one of the things you noted here was that the local newspaper has been positive.
They have. They wrote a really nice story. It wasn't quite a full-page story, but it was a really good story. And the newspapers, they like this because it helps them get that information. In fact, they're some of the people that have traditionally asked us for information. There was a story that they did about a year and a half ago. They were interested in city-owned parcels and ones that were not occupied by city facilities. And it took us a while to get that to them. I was sharing with the reporter when he and I spoke a couple of months ago that, hey, go online. There's a data set of city-owned parcels, and it shows right there, what is the square footage, who's using it, et cetera. So he was really excited. Marketing team is working with my group in the county to do a big launch. We decided to wait until the county was ready to go live with their portal. We figured it was a more impactful launch, and we hope that to happen in the June timeframe. Although their portal is ready, there's another initiative that's kind of stalling the launch. So at that point, we'll get many more people looking at our portal. I think we'll get a lot more feedback at that point.
Perfect. Thank you for going into that. This next piece here was some information that Say specifically wanted to have some time to address and talk through. So Say, I'd love to have you run through this slide and just share some of your thoughts on this. And Eric, if anything jumps to mind, please feel free to join in.
Okay. not a problem at all. This slide and the next slide actually is a combination of one. And Eric is absolutely right. So, I mean, being able to create an open data portal and the very beginning of the stage of times in the last few months has definitely given us a more advantageous role compared to the other cities or organization or county that hasn't done that. Because with the California Senate Bill 272 that is coming in, is actually the tipping points for Californians out there for local government's mandates to make changes as in terms of collecting an enterprise architectural systems, databases, dictionaries, and all that, and beginning to post it out onto the so-called open data portals or in regional open data sites. We are, again, on multiple fronts as already and to be able to circumvent and to be able to work with the process already, because we're working with the regional open data portal with Sacramento area council governments. The other progress and success and also lesson learned is that don't take open data as, thinking of just taking raw data that you're putting out there to be redistributed and not to be able to make business decision process. Eric has mentioned using crime data sets, business permitting information out there. Have a goals out there that you will be making business decisions, intelligent business decisions based on advanced data analytic modules, right? And the other things out there is that make sure your city, your department heads, your executive team, your councils embrace and you have a policy in place as in terms of how your data standards and release procedures would take place. People will meet, and once they see the benefits of all this open data sets are being published out there, what is being used in a day-to-day in our digital age today, they will recognize the efficiency and the effectiveness of the data. Most importantly, Roseville put it out there with the data sites. It's a one-stop shopping concept. We combine all the data sets that used to be in multiple websites today. We put it all into one central location. And the branding is so easy. You relatively just send the folks out to the data sites called data.roseville.ca.us. All the communications, all the same consistent view, all the same dynamic fashion. Every citizen sees the same things out there. There's an article that we usually quote within our innovative technology teams. It's for every dollar spent on technologies out there, it's a $3.50 savings for any government's efficiency and effectiveness projects that we implement out there. So those are progress, success, and part of the lesson learned that we have today. And we'll be willing to share our policies and our process and how our teams are being formed and with any audience and participants out there.
Yeah, I want to add something to that. Okay, Aslan?
Yeah, please, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, so Say brings up a really good point. And, again, I come from the private sector in a company that was known for a lot of instrumentation and measurements and stuff. And one thing I found in the public sector is that there is not as much reliance on data to help inform decision making. And part of it is because of the analysis tools just were not there. And so what we've been doing with our Tsikata platform on a couple of examples is taking data from that and starting to use it to inform decision making. For example, we just had probably a 4-hour city council meeting on Tuesday where we were tackling sort of our question of how we respond to the growing homeless situation in Santa Rosa and Sonoma County. And one of the things that we showed was a data set that came from Tsikata, frankly, that showed the results of our 311 system, our CRM system. Basically, we showed that the public had requested service calls on all of these homeless-related incidents across the city. And so, we used a nice graphical approach that showed where the distributions of calls was. And it was really interesting for our city council to see that this is not just something that's downtown, as you might expect. It's along the creeks, it's in neighborhoods, it's in the more affluent neighborhoods. And so using that data to help inform and get the discussion going was really interesting. And frankly, we did not have the capability to do that before. We're doing a similar thing with our permitting data. Like a lot of cities, we're seeing that our permits are going up, our building permits are increasing over time as the economy gets better. And I was able to show the community development director some data he had never seen before that says, hey, here are the charts looking at the business permit data from the last 3 or 4 years, and it's interesting to see how the building moves around the city. The new building permits move around the city, how the density moves around the city. So Say brings up a really good point. It's a great tool for starting to bring that data internally for decision making. Okay, back to you, Aslan.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think that was great information, and you know, as much as people want to find out about the challenges, they really want to know that, you know, going forward and maybe implementing an open data program that is worth it. So thank you for sharing those successes. Hindsight's 20/20. We get that, and you know, if we could all go back in time, we would do things differently. But is there anything specific that you would do differently with regard to the programs, the data you started with, maybe the communication? What changes might you make if you could have a do-over? Eric?
My bullet is with elected officials. We really should have engaged our elected officials earlier on in the process. Now they are strong supporters, but what I would have liked better is that they were leading it in the public and at the council. So that's the one thing we would have done differently. And you know, just hindsight, get your electeds involved, get them to understand what it means to their constituents, get them talking about it, and not just reactively, but proactively. Okay, back to you.
Eric is absolutely right. It's getting your councils, your board of supervisors, and all that to buy in upfront is very critical out there. The other thing I would also mention too is continue to communicate and continue to collaborate among your departments and departmental teams that has all the systems of records of information that are publishing out there, because this is essentially a quote-unquote an open crowdsourcing, you know, methodologies that people are putting information out there. If no one's using it, they're virtually essentially useless. And keep communicating out there, using every opportunity, such as National Hacking Day that is coming up, such as hackathons events, such as any open government events. Continue to push out this, you know, open data programs out there, and that is the, you know, things that I would be looking back that would do things a little bit differently. Fantastic.
And you know, unfortunately, we don't get do-overs, but I think what's great is folks on the call that are thinking about following the footsteps of Santa Rosa and Roseville can take some of those lessons learned and maybe not have to do things differently. So thank you. So I'm excited. We've gotten quite a few questions in from folks on the line. So we'll start with a few of those. And the first one is because people are really interested in both of your sites. Is they would like the URLs for the data sites one more time. So if you gentlemen would provide those and slow it down a bit to let people write those down quickly. And,
okay, the City of Santa Rosa's is data.srcity.org. That's like samrobertscity.org. So data.srcity.org.
And Eric, while I have you, folks are looking for your contact info as well, if you'd like to provide that.
Yes. Oh, my email address. It's McHenry, so EMCHENRY @srcity.org.
Perfect. And same from you as possible.
Well, actually, I think the other app we have that I always forget to mention, it's just tied to open data, is our budget portal, and that's budget.srcity.org.
All right, Say, all yours.
Okay. So City of Roseville Open Data Portal, it's located at data.roseville.ca.us. And my email address is hsae@roseville.ca.us.
Great. Thank you very much. And we'll, post-call, we'll send out contact info, the PowerPoint, and any other questions that came up. So another one that just came through is, how do you use your open data portal in day-to-day operations? And Say, we'll kick it off with you.
So one of the most important things that we do is any open record request or public data request that comes in, we try to steer towards the open data portal, including creating the view sets for the citizens or community to be able to access to it. That's the simplest way to getting people to buy in immediately. The second thing is that internal employees or team members who is trying to post information out there, we're trying to, again, direct the process and the internal policy is to create a data set if it's deemed public accessible, and we'll put them onto the open data portal websites. So those are the two most important things out there.
And from the City of Santa Rosa side, same thing. Our Public Records Act's request, we try to put those up there to the extent that we can. And the other part, as I said, we're starting to use them more for analysis. We're just getting started with that. I think the concept of using data as a tool to inform decision makings is a growing one here at our city.
Great, thank you. Next question is for both of you. Roseville, Santa Rosa, do either city use SunGuard public sector applications? And Say, we'll start with you.
For Roseville, the answer is yes. And we are aware that SunGuard One solution has a interface that would be able to provide the interfaces to the Tsikata. But we're not at the One solution yet at this point. We're still at the IFAS software application. SunGuard has at least about 4 or 5 different financial applications that is in the public sector.
And Eric, does Santa Rosa use
it's funny. I could actually just duplicate Say's comment exactly. We're at the same thing. We use IFAS, SunGuard IFAS. That's our ERP, so it does our financial, general ledger, HR solution for our city. We are moving to One solution over the next year, and at some point we will be looking at how it interfaces to Tsikata. Mainly for a lot of the payroll and data like that.
Perfect. Next question. How easy was it to get executive buy-in for an open data portal? And we'll kick it off with you, Eric.
Yeah, it was mixed. A guy I used to work with years ago said, when you look at a new change, you could also often look at it as sort of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Sort of a third of the people are, yeah, it sounds great, let's go ahead and try it. On the far right, there's a third are like, no, I don't think so. And there's a third in the middle that are kind of looking both ways to see which way it's going to go. We had the same thing in our city and our executive staff. I'd say probably 1/3 of the directors like, yeah, sure, sounds great. Our city manager was the same way. We had a couple of our directors not understanding why we wanted to do this, concerned, as I mentioned, about increased workload, concerned about legal liability, things like that. And we had about a third in the middle that were just sort of wanting to see where it went. What was really important for us was our city manager to say, we're doing this. And he said, I want to talk with all of you as directors, get you all on the same table, that we are going to do this. And what he understood quite clearly is that if you do not have a department that participates, it makes it challenging for everyone else, because if we were to launch an open data portal and not put some of the stuff that the more popular data sets out there, then it sort of begs the question of why aren't we doing it? It actually evokes more of a conversation than putting it all out there, because it appears we're hiding something or there's a reason why we're not putting it out there. So we all as a team felt it was important that we're all in this together. Let's all do it. Every department head who had a data set needed to sort of identify 1 or 2 to get ready for the launch. Okay.
Thank you. How about you, Say? Struggles, ease to get executive buy-in?
Eric is absolutely right. So, I mean, you got, a third and a third and third, or the 80-20 rules, right? It's 20% of the folks that don't really like it, they're the one that would be able to tip the, decision-making process, 80% of the time. But why do we wait? Why do we constantly holding it up? the federal government has made it a standard, the state government has made it a standard, and now there are going to be, Senate bills 272 and several different cybersecurity bills are coming in that we would be observing privacy of information posting, confidentiality of information posting, and generic information posting. Why do we wait? I mean, this is not an expensive ways of doing things, and it's the right things to do. And more importantly, you have the executive buy-in that's in terms of the policy of why we're posting information on so many different places and so many different websites. We're now doing a one-stop shopping process out there. As soon as we were able to communicate that these are all the process improvements and business process reengineering, and it's pretty much everybody buy in as a consensus decision-making process in all department heads.
Great, thank you very much. So another question that came in, and I'll let you determine how you want to measure this, but how long did it take to implement your open portal project? And Say, why don't we have you start that one?
I'll keep it short and simple. As I mentioned before, it took us almost about 9 months or so for proof of concept pilot testing process with Microsoft grants and with the great help from Tsikata groups and things like that. So when we roll out in January on the soft launch, it was relatively simple out there. And with all the lesson learned and all the information that we have, and other agencies could come out that we share this information with them, their process of implementations could be so much quicker out there.
Yeah, and for our side, again, I'm not trying to plug Tsikata too much, but there was a really good process, implementation process that uses project tracking tools and a way to communicate back with the Tsikata team. So our bare bones site went went up for use probably within 2 or 3 weeks. And it was really paced by our internal folks of deciding on branding and what type of tiles we wanted and stuff. So the initial site went up early, within 2 or 3 weeks of us saying, yeah, we're good to go. And I'd say that 75% of the data sets that we went live with were ready within 2 months. It was those last 25% of the data sets we identified we want to go live with that took some time. And those were the ones around public safety that we were trying to understand a little bit better about how we should abstract data for confidentiality or privacy reasons. And then we had a little bit of buy-in required, additional buy-in required to launch. But yeah, it probably took about 6 months from nose to tail, I'd say, to get to the place we could go live.
Fantastic, and obviously there's two varying degrees of time there. One is maybe the technology piece, which Eric, you experienced can be turned on in a matter of hours, weeks, and then it sounds like yours was more of a process around policy and implementation and going through some additional checks and balances. Would that be a fair assessment?
Absolutely, yes. Okay,
fantastic. I think we have one last question that just snuck over the wire. Is data from Sonoma County's upstream investments and cradle to career initiatives being made public? And I assume that's for you, Eric. I don't know. Okay.
The county would have to answer that. That's not a data set that I had seen. Just to expand on that, though, that there's some of our data sets overlap. Some don't, right? Because the county has Health and Human Services that covers the whole county, including our city. So our city does not have a corresponding data set for Health and Human Services, for example. So of those, I just unfortunately don't know.
Great, thank you. So one thing I want to mention while we have folks on the line is June 9th, we're doing a live stream event called, or entitled Meet the New Tsikata Experience. So if you go to Tsikata.com, please feel free to register for that live event. Our CEO, Kevin Merritt, will be sharing some of the updates and information around how we're rethinking open data. And so we encourage you to join us. And Eric and Say, any last words, anything you want to share before we wrap up and let folks get off to lunch?
Well, I'll start. It really was one of these fun projects, I have to say. it's the right thing to do at the right time from a technology and from our city's perspective. It's a really fun project. As I mentioned when I kicked off, when I came into the public sector, I was really intrigued about, how do we make this data more available to our public? I tell the story just briefly to a lot of people when I came to the city was that, it was hard to find out what streetlights were on or off or why, or what was happening downtown, and that's been a personal interest of mine, and frankly, a lot of my peers in the city, and this tool allows us to do that really easily. The fact that it's hosted is great. The fact that it's easy to use is great. And as I said, it's the right thing at the right time. Okay, back to you.
How about you, Say?
I would mention a few things out there that Open Data Portal is not just a technology project. It's an innovative business initiative overall for an effective and accountable government, and that's what it pretty much stands for. And we would love to jump on it on any kind of great initiative that come on board. This is also, again, is a crowdsourcing program. What we call crowdsourcing is because we use the power of the people to be able to look at the data sets and tell us that how can government do business much quicker, easier, faster and cheaper. And again, if anyone have any questions, and I believe Eric and I will be able to, talk to you offline and emailing us and or call us, and that's the best way to reach us. And thank you for putting up this together. Appreciate it, Athlon.
No, and I want to share that this is a very cool experience and a neat treat for me to work with both Eric and Say outside of the webinar, customers of mine. So I appreciate both of you very much taking the time out of your day to join us, sharing your experiences, and ultimately, to your continued success. Thank you for the work you've done with us, and thank you again for being here. Thank you. And with that, we'll call it a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.